evening. You're watching London Live News at 6 with Alicia Edwards. Coming up tonight, a man has been stabbed to death in a side road near the busy shopping area of Oxford Street. More on the way. The Mayor joins the police in warning Londoners to stay out of deep water after a man in his early 20s was found by police divers in Hampton Court. We'll have an update on London's weather in the next 10 minutes. It's keeping us all talking. And as the hot weather continues, concerns for dehydration in the elderly population. We'll have more on the signs to look out for. And the Londoners willing to risk their well-being for a hair transplant as the number of unregulated surgeries are on the rise. All of that on the way before 7 o'clock. But first tonight, a man has been stabbed to death in a side road near Oxford Street. The Metropolitan Police said officers were called at around 11:40 this morning to reports of a stabbing in Poland Street. Both the London Ambulance Service and the air ambulance attended, but the victim was pronounced dead at the scene 40 minutes later. A man has been arrested. A hosepipe ban will be announced for London within days and come into force next week. That's according to the Evening Standard. The paper understands Thames Water will formally confirm the measures later this week. This comes as the London Fire Brigade said it was being stretched to the limit by 200 wildfires over the weekend, which is 10 times more than normal for this time of year. Officers said there had been 340 grass fires in the first week of August, which is 8 times more than the same week last year. The Mayor has met firefighters to see the results of the recent grass fires, putting out a warning to Londoners over disposing of litter, particularly glass, responsibly, as well as putting out cigarettes properly, not using disposable barbecues and avoiding barbecues in open spaces or on balconies. He also encouraged Londoners to stay away from the deep water because of dangers in our canals, rivers and reservoirs. Well, it comes as the body of a man has been recovered by police looking for a man in the River Thames after reports of a swimmer calling for help after getting into difficulty by Hampton Court Bridge. The man, believed to be in his early 20s, was found by police divers in Hampton Court at around 10:30 last night. 3 police forces, the London Fire Brigade, London Ambulance Service and RNLI began the search after being alerted to a person in the water at about 4:10. The victim's family has been informed. The Met have been urging people to stay out of the water, saying the risk to loss of life is incredibly real after a series of tragic incidents. The Metropolitan Police has referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct following a complaint after athlete Ricardo dos Santos was stopped while driving home in the capital. The athlete, who was allegedly racially profiled during a stop and search, has said he was pulled over for a second time by 7 armed police officers while driving home in London. Ricardo published a series of tweets and video footage of him being pulled over and questioned by police during the early hours of Sunday morning. Tanya Francis has more.
Sprinter Ricardo dos Santos, who was pulled over by the police yesterday, has uploaded these videos on Twitter. They show the moment 7 Met police officers flagged down the car on the A40 Westway at around 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, the force have said the armed officers were doing a routine patrol and were concerned dos Santos may have been on his phone. They also said they called for backup as it took him around 5 minutes to actually stop the car. Well, this isn't the first time the athlete has been pulled over. It first happened in 2020 when he was in the car with his partner and 3-month-old son. Well, the couple accused the police of racially profiling them, and the 5 officers involved are facing a gross misconduct hearing. The Olympic medalist has said he is annoyed nothing has changed 2 years later, and on Twitter questions why 7 armed officers needed to be there when he was alone in the car. The police have invited him to get in touch to discuss the matter further, with dos Santos saying he's dealing with it with his lawyer.
Tanya Francis there. Now, Bill Bryson and a host of award-winning architects are opposing plans to demolish the Marks and Spencer at Marble Arch. The retail giant wants to demolish the existing 92-year-old Art Deco building on Oxford Street and replace it with a 10-storey steel and glass retail and office complex. The proposal has been criticised by campaigners who say that it should be refurbished instead to save embedded carbon emissions. Travel author Bill Bryson has donated £500 to a crowdfunder established by the campaign group opposing the plans. The mother of a man who died following a hotel blaze felt tremendous guilt that she was not there to help rescue her son and his partner from the fire that claimed their lives. An inquiry is heard today. Simon Midgley and his partner Richard Dyson from London died following the blaze at a 5-star Cameron House hotel on the banks of Loch Lomond in December 2017. The fatal accident inquiry is looking at issues around guest and fire safety at the hotel. The UK has become the first country to approve Moderna's dual vaccine, which targets both the original COVID virus and the newer Omicron variant. The jab could be available as an autumn booster and give better protection against variants. How many doses are available and who will get them has yet to be announced. All over 50s and people in high-risk groups are set to be offered a booster of some kind from next month. The co-founder of UK Black Pride said she was blown away with the community solidarity shown after more than 15,000 people joined the annual event yesterday. Europe's largest pride celebration for LGBTQI+ people of African, Asian, Caribbean, Latin American and Middle Eastern descent took place in a new venue this year, the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park in Stratford, as the number of attendees continued to rise. On to sport now. 29 years on from one of the biggest fights in British boxing history between Chris Eubank and Nigel Benn, their sons will now step into the ring to renew the family rivalry. Eubank Jr. is a favourite against Conor Benn and believes their family names are on the line. With the fight at the O2 and both families coming from the capital, it's a huge night for the London boxing scene as well. Eubank Jr. said the fight is for the fans and knows how much it'll mean to everyone involved.
So this is a fantasy fight right here. This is a fight for the fans. This is a fight for history. This is a fight for legacy. You know, I've got to uphold my family name in this fight, 100%. So there's a lot of pressure, but pressure is one thing I deal with exceptionally well. So I'm ready to go. You know, that was a fight that I watched that made me realize what boxing really was and what I would have to do, you know, what I would have to sacrifice to even, you know, to even have a shot at making it, you know. And that really, it brings it home. It makes you understand that this sport is no joke. It's life or death. You know, those men, my father, Nigel Benn, they put their lives on the line in those fights for the public's entertainment. You know, it shows you how serious the sport is, and it inspired me. It inspired me to want to reach those heights.
There we are, Chris Eubank Jr. there on that fight, which is taking place on the 8th of October at the O2. A big one for boxing fans. Right, it's time for a check on the weather now. We're all talking about it. There's a yellow warning of thunderstorms in place at the moment. There are some spells of rain coming in overnight after the temperatures have dropped down into the high 20s today. Finally, a cooler night than we've had for a few days with lows of 19 degrees. Tomorrow we can expect a cloudy start to the day with highs of 25, and later in the afternoon there is a chance of some of those isolated showers we've been warned of. Looking ahead to Wednesday, temperatures in the low 20s with those thunderstorms over the capital throughout the day. It's clearing overnight into Thursday with some sunshine back on the cards and highs of a more manageable 25 degrees. I'm sure we're all looking forward to temperatures dropping just a little bit. Right, just before the break, footage here shows a fox being released back into the wild after a major rescue operation. He had a lucky escape after falling into a dry dock in the direct sunlight close to a hotel in the capital with no way out. Worried guests reported having seen the fox down in the 30 feet deep concrete container close to the Doubletree Hilton in Rotherhithe. The rescue operation came as temperatures were at almost 30 degrees, putting the fox in great danger. Well, he's now safely back in the wild, thanks to those who rescued him. Right, it's time for a break now, but don't go anywhere, because on the way, as A-level results are upon us, we'll be hearing why many London students are choosing to stay local for their degrees.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello there, welcome back. Time now for a look at some other stories affecting Londoners. Next year's increase in rail fares in England will be below the current rate of inflation, the government has announced. The Department for Transport said next year's rise in fares will be delayed until March and will be lower than the RPI figure for last month, which was 11.8%. An increase around that figure would add hundreds of pounds to the cost of many annual season tickets, as well as being lower than the RPI. The increase itself will, of course, be delayed until March. Researchers have successfully altered the blood type of 3 donor kidneys, which they've described as a game-changing discovery that could have a massive impact on patients waiting for a transplant. The development could increase the supply of kidneys available for transplants, particularly within ethnic minority groups who are less likely to find a match, according to scientists. A kidney from someone with an A blood type cannot be transplanted to someone with a B blood type, nor the other way around. But changing the blood type to the universal O will allow more transplants to take place, as it can be used for people with any blood type. And the Duke and Duchess of Sussex are to visit the UK next month to attend charity events. Harry and Meghan will also visit Germany as part of their trip to support several charities close to their hearts, according to their spokesperson. The couple will travel to Manchester for the One Young World Summit and to the capital for the Well Child Awards. Now, as A-level results week is upon us, new research finds an attitude shift surrounding university placement. Only 1 in 5 Londoners wish to live away from home during a university course, and 95% of Brits say that the current economic climate will influence their decisions around university. Well, Lynn Grimes is the Director of Student Recruitment at Birkbeck, University of London, and is here with more. Lynn, thank you so much for joining me today. So London applicants wanting to stay put for uni, it's not something we're used to, really.
It's not something we're used to at all, but in fact this was very, very surprising. And it also is that a huge percentage of them, 42%, don't believe they will miss out by staying at home. They believe that if they can stay at home and work, then their experience will be exactly the same.
It really is a very different attitude from what we've experienced in the past. How does that stat change outside of London for people who are considering their choices? Are you still seeing lots of applicants who are wanting to leave home and get into the city?
I think it's even higher outside because if you take the average cost of accommodation in London for a student, it's between £130 and £260 a week, and that's in London. Obviously, if you're in the heart of London, it's at the higher end. And people coming from other areas just cannot simply afford that. It means they're coming out of university education, having to take loans, you know, with not only the student loan to cover their costs, but to cover their maintenance costs, their cost of living, their food, their accommodation, and to say it's now becoming impossible for people not to work whilst they're at uni and support themselves because their parents can't support them. So I think that's why the attitude change has been, if I stay at home and I do work, then the money I've got is my money to have a good time. So they are a different generation, this generation. They are very, very socially aware and they're not the typical students of the past who want to go away from home and have a good time. They are serious thinkers. They're serious university goers who want to get their degree and get on the career ladder.
Yeah, and aware of the financial implications of making that decision to study. How far is the loan going now? Because it used to cover a lot more than it probably does for students now, didn't it?
Well, it doesn't unless your income is low. There are very few maintenance grants now. There are only the student loan for the tuition fee. So students are having to work because parents simply cannot afford to subsidise that. So if you're from a low-income family, you are entitled to some money, but that's never going to cover everything you need.
How have you noticed that in the number of applications that you've been receiving?
Well, we're an evening university, and we were set up. Birkbeck was set up 200 years ago to educate working Londoners. And so our students predominantly work, and they have their lectures in the evening. With the onset of lectures plus online facilities now that are so good to be able people to catch up on their lectures, we're finding that we're we've been a very popular option this year, because students know they can get a job and then do their degree while they're doing it, and they've got a foot on the career ladder, and they can just use the degree to move on.
Yeah.
And reduce their debt. In fact, some of them earn enough to start paying off their student loan as they're getting it, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And looking ahead now to later in the week, results day, an anxious time for many students, or for every student. Obviously, in recent years, we've seen lots of changes to the way the results come in, the way that they're graded, and obviously over the pandemic, massive changes to the way that students were receiving their results. Where are we now, and how has the last few years impacted, you know, recruitment, how you look at bringing people into the courses? Because obviously the averages must be off a little bit.
They're totally off. The last 2 years, they've been teacher assessed grades. This is the first cohort for 2 years that have taken A-levels. So these are going to be externally marked exam grades. And there is no doubt that will have an impact. Last year in clearing, I would say 80% of students got their first choice, because because the offers are made on teacher assessed grades. And if the teacher says they think they're going to get 2 A's and a B, that's what a university will offer. And of course, this year, there's the chance that those grades won't come through. We are hearing in the sector that there's going to be about 60,000 students in clearing this year, which is a huge increase in last year and the year before. So that will impact as well. And some universities, of course, over-recruited because they offer conditional offers on grades, assuming that a certain percentage won't get them. And where they did get them, obviously they did get them last year, they over-recruited. And so they're having to cut back slightly this year. And we saw it in the press about medical and nursing, you know, the large numbers of people coming through. And if a university has offered a place, then it has to honour the place if students get the grades.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a busy clearing this year.
Absolutely. Well, Lynn, thank you so much for taking the time to chat to us during what is undoubtedly going to be a very busy week for you. Thank you so much.
It is. Thanks, Alicia. Bye.
Lynn Grimes there from Birkbeck University. Now, with the rocketing temperatures we've been experiencing in recent days, concerns have been raised for the well-being of the elderly in the capital. There has been a surge in the number of people taking notice of the risks of dehydration among the elderly population, with an increase of over 5,000% in online searches into symptoms of dehydration in the elderly over the last 30 days. That's according to care home marketplace Lottie. The company's co-founder and care expert Chris Donnelly told me more.
If you're incredibly tired, one of the main reasons for that might be the fact that you're dehydrated. I think that the adults that we've certainly seen recently who are suffering from dehydration will be unaware that they're going through it themselves, and so they will be experiencing a significant amount of heat and dehydration themselves, but not actually knowing that not knowing it's sort of happening to themselves. So I think that's the first one. Is just intense tiredness, and then around the mouth they'll become incredibly dry. So yeah, I think there's a few to acknowledge, but I think fatigue, confusion, like drowsiness.
What are the risks of dehydration?
Well, I think again it depends on the adult, but I think in terms of drowsiness and confusion, I think it can lead to someone, potentially, having a fall or getting lost or, collapsing. And I think these things are all, can be relatively harmless, but can be very significant if someone does pass out and bash their head or bash their arm or their leg or something. It could be very serious.
How can the elderly population be encouraged to drink, particularly in care homes where they're being looked after but needing something as basic as having a drink of water? How can we ensure that the elderly people are managing to do that? Because it's easy to to think that it's a simple task, but actually it can be forgotten, can't it?
Yeah, I think one of the easiest things to get people to drink more is to offer them lots of different choices of drinks. So, I mean, our company helps people go into care homes, and one of the things we've been saying to our partners is, let's just offer loads of different varieties of drinks. So, like, fruit drinks, or Lucozade type drinks, or tea, or whatever it is that in the moment they want, and then just making sure that you're making a note of how much they've actually drunk. Because I think that, again, so many of our elderly population have memory issues at the same time as having other issues. And if that is the case, they don't know how much or how little they've drunk. So keeping a note of it. I think eating healthy, like eating lots of fruit, is a very good way of, hydrating as well. And I think the thing that people will often take for granted is if someone is on medication and it's hot outside and the medication has some sort of effect that it dehydrates you more, then you really are in a very vulnerable position if you don't know that you need to drink more. And then the other one I'd say is probably avoid caffeine and sugar as much as you can, and alcohol as much as you can, basically.
So those cups of tea, maybe not the best idea?
Well, it depends on the individual. If it's only tea they'll drink, then they'll have to. But I think, alcohol is definitely the one to stay away from.
Yeah. What's your feedback been over the last few weeks of the experiences people are having in these heat waves?
Yeah, I mean, it's incredibly tough. I think we work with care homes and elderly people every single day, and I think that it's incredibly tough to make people hydrate and make people sort of acknowledge that the heat is actually a very dangerous thing if you are slightly vulnerable. And so our advice is always just to really try and make a note of how much someone is drinking, and just make sure that that individual is just being a little bit more careful and a little bit more vigilant than they can. And obviously, if you can get hold of air conditioning or a fan or something, then definitely do that.
There we are, Chris Donnelly there with the signs to look out for if you have any concerns. You're watching London Live News with Alicia Edwards. A reminder of our top story coming up after the break. Plus, warning over black market hair transplants in the capital as people risk their health for the treatment.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Hello there, welcome back. A reminder of our main story this evening. A man has been stabbed to death in a side road near Oxford Street. The Metropolitan Police said officers were called at around 11:40 this morning to reports of a stabbing in Poland Street. Both the London Ambulance Service and the air ambulance attended, but the victim was pronounced dead at the scene 40 minutes later. A man has been arrested. A hosepipe ban will be announced for London within days and come into force next week. That's according to the Evening Standard. The paper understands Thames Water will formally confirm the measures later this week. This comes as the London Fire Brigade said it was being stretched to the limit by 200 wildfires over the weekend, which is 10 times more than normal for this time of year. Officers said there have been 340 grass fires in the first week of August, which is 8 times more than the same week last year. The Mayor has met firefighters to see the results of the recent grass fires, putting out a warning to Londoners over disposing of litter, particularly glass, responsibly, as well as putting out cigarettes properly, not using disposable barbecues and avoiding barbecues in open spaces or on balconies. He also encouraged Londoners to stay away from the deep water because of dangers in our canals, rivers and reservoirs. Well, it comes as the body of a man has been recovered by police looking for a man in the River Thames after reports of a swimmer calling for help after getting into difficulty by Hampton Court Bridge. The man, believed to be in his early 20s, was found by police divers in Hampton Court at around 10:30 last night. 3 police forces, the London Fire Brigade, London Ambulance Service and RNLI began the search after being alerted to a person in the water at about 4:10. The victim's family has been informed. The Met have been urging people to stay out of the water, saying the risk to loss of life is incredibly real after a series of tragic incidents. The Metropolitan Police has referred itself to the Independent Office for Police Conduct following a complaint after athlete Ricardo dos Santos was stopped while driving home in the capital. The athlete, who was allegedly racially profiled during a stop and search, has said he was pulled over for a second time by 7 armed police officers while driving home in London. Ricardo published a series of tweets and video footage of him being pulled over and questioned by police during the early hours of Sunday morning. Tanya Francis has more.
Sprinter Ricardo dos Santos, who was pulled over by the police yesterday, has uploaded these videos on Twitter. They show the moment 7 Met police officers flagged down the car on the A40 Westway at around 4 o'clock in the morning. Well, the force have said the armed officers were doing a routine patrol and were concerned dos Santos may have been on his phone. They also said they called for backup as it took him around 5 minutes to actually stop the car. Well, this isn't the first time the athlete has been pulled over. It first happened in 2020 when he was in the car with his partner and 3-month-old son. Well, the couple accused the police of racially profiling them, and the 5 officers involved are facing a gross misconduct hearing. The Olympic medalist has said he is annoyed nothing has changed 2 years later, and on Twitter questions why 7 armed officers needed to be there when he was alone in the car. The police have invited him to get in touch to discuss the matter further, with dos Santos saying he's dealing with it with his lawyer.
Tanya Francis there. Now, Bill Bryson and a host of award-winning architects are opposing plans to demolish the Marks & Spencer at Marble Arch. The retail giant wants to demolish the existing 92-year-old Art Deco building on Oxford Street and replace it with a 10-storey steel and glass retail and office complex. The proposal has been criticised by campaigners who say that it should be refurbished instead to save embedded carbon emissions. Travel author Bill Bryson has donated £500 to a crowdfunder established by the campaign group opposing the plans. Now, a London surgeon has warned the issue of black market hair transplants is on the rise in the capital. With 85% of men suffering from alopecia or balding, unlicensed and unqualified doctors are doing the treatment, resulting in permanent visible scarring and infections, among other issues. Dr. Raja is a specialist hair transplant surgeon based in the capital who has dedicated some of his time to helping those suffering from the effects of poor quality hair transplants. And he wants to raise awareness of what people should be looking out for.
There's 2 main methods by which we're performing hair transplants at the moment. One of them, by far the most popular at the moment, is the FUE method, also known as follicular unit excision hair transplant surgery, and that involves taking individual follicles from a donor area, which is usually the back of the head, and then implanting them into areas of loss. It has its advantages over the previously more popular method of FUT surgery, which also in some cases can be better if you've got longer hair, but people tend to opt for the FUE more so now because the downtime is much less and there's no visible linear scarring. So they're the 2 main modes by which we perform the surgery.
What are the risks of the procedure being done incorrectly or unprofessionally?
Certainly, this is something that we're starting to see more and more so, and the risk can be certainly quite high in these cases. I mean, people can be left disfigured a lot of the time with really bad scarring in the donor area, and over-harvesting of grafts can lead to that. So clinics which are promising unlimited grafts or a very large number of grafts in one session, usually for me that's a big red flag. Because we always work to our limitations. It doesn't mean that you can't achieve a good result. It might mean you need more than one session, but it's always better to be prudent when you're looking at harvesting follicles. So people are often drawn in by the low cost, and of course, told that they're going to have the highest number of grafts taken, and that can lead to really bad results that look unnatural and leave people in a very desperate situation where they end up having to then seek help elsewhere. By which point it might be very difficult to treat.
Do you think there's the issue of the fact that because it doesn't appear to perhaps be such an invasive surgery as other cosmetic procedures can be, that people maybe feel they don't need to do as much research into it before they go ahead?
I think, we're starting to see a shift in the way people think about hair transplants, and, it was quite a taboo subject some time ago, but now people are becoming more and more open about it. We don't belittle the surgery in any way. I mean, anyone who's a dedicated hair transplant surgeon, for us, we understand the impact of hair loss and the detrimental effect it can have, to the point where, in some cases people can end up being suicidal. So, we take it very seriously, but, there's a lot of people out there who will take a chance in order to try and get a better look, but they might end up worse off than they were before. And we see a lot of these.
For people who are thinking about getting this procedure done, how can they know where's safe to go? What should they be looking for?
Absolutely. There's a lot of marketing material out at the moment online where people will be drawn in by particularly low cost, and often the lower cost clinics or some of those that we have concerns about can come across quite well. So people are drawn in by this, and what we always tell patients is that they should educate themselves in terms of how the procedure is performed, who's going to be doing the surgery, and should always go to a reputable surgeon and a reputable clinic, somebody who's dedicated to doing hair transplant surgery, and turn to the societies such as the British Association of Hair Restoration Surgery or the International Society of Hair Restoration Surgery, and they can point you usually in the right direction and provide a lot of resources about the procedure itself.
We have seen an increase in recent years of, in celebrity culture, seeing people in the public eye having this procedure done, people like Wayne Rooney in recent history. How much of an impact has that had on the number of people coming in? Do they reference those kinds of names?
Absolutely. I think it's opened the floodgates for the industry, and there are a lot of celebrities that are starting to become open about having the procedure done. And certainly had an impact on a lot of younger men as well, who often it can lead to unrealistic expectations. It's something that we have to manage during the consultation process, but it certainly made it more, it's normalized hair transplant surgery to some degree, and I think it's certainly increased the demand for it as well.
There we are, Dr. Raja there, with his concerns over people unknowingly taking risks for those transplants. Right, it's time for a break now, but don't go anywhere, because coming up, why the new flags along Oxford Street are doing their bit for the environment. We'll have more after this short break.
From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live. From breaking news to headline events, the latest trends and places to be.
You can now keep up to date on daily life in London across London Live's social platforms.
Start the day with an update on the travel and weather, and know what's on around the city and what's being seen by others.
With stories from London Live's team of reporters and your videos of the news moments that matter.
Minute by minute. That's London Live News on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram and more.
Find us at London Live.
Welcome back. You're watching London Live News at 6. Now, a new book fair at the Saatchi Gallery is opening next month, which will bring together more than 120 exhibitors from around the world. Firsts, London's Rare Book Fair will include a diverse selection of rare books, maps, manuscripts, letters, and many more. This year's fair will respond to the theme Banned Books. Let's have a look.
First London, which will be at Saatchi Gallery this year, is a rare book fair. We have over 120 exhibitors coming from all around the world, and they bring their rare books that they have for sale. The book fair has been an annual event for over 60 years, and every year we try and come up with some new angle on rare books and the printing of rare books. And this year is the 100th anniversary of Ulysses. Ulysses was published in 1922, and it's possibly the most famous, one of the most famous books of the 20th century to be banned for obscenity. So there's been lots of celebrations. So we thought it would be sensible to actually celebrate this, but then look at the broader picture of banned books and censorship, which seems to be still very much part of our world. But actually censorship and suppression of information has been around for hundreds of years, and there will be examples of that at the book fair. This year's been a joy because we had a fair last year in October, and which was during COVID, and we couldn't have any international visitors particularly. So this year's been much better. We've sold out the event. We have 50 new exhibitors from last year, which was fantastic, and they're from all over the world. I mean, Australia, America, France, Germany, and obviously a lot of British dealers. The Saatchi Gallery is a great venue to project us, and in First London, you know, is absolute premier rare book fair in the UK, and so actually getting visitors to come, it's the easier one to do. So we look forward to welcoming the rare book world and others who want to come and see some rare books. There are books, you know, from the 15th century through to the 20th century, and probably even 21st century, I suspect. So a rare book is a collectible book. They tend to be first editions, not always, but hence the title First London. And so it is basically, when was this book first come out? So, you know, Lady Chatterley's Lover is a famous banned book. There'll be the original first editions that actually got out. It was printed in Italy because it was banned in the UK. But there'll be the original Italian versions there, as well as the original Ulysses versions there as well. But it won't just be banned books. People will have books from all genres, be it travel books or science. There's a first edition of Copernicus, which is the most famous science book rarely discovered, the effect of the Earth and the Sun, and that's going to be for sale for £2 million. But there will also be books from £20 and £30 and £40. So it's a real broad spectrum, and there should be something for everybody there. I think there's two types of visitors that come to a rare book fair, and in particular firsts, because first is the top of the top league. So you have at the very top end, you have opportunities to see and look at some of the most expensive and rarest books that exist in the marketplace. So for the more connoisseur collector, there is a fantastic opportunity to see all these dealers at once. But also it's a wonderful opportunity for anyone interested in learning about rare books, about collecting rare books. So because there's such an entry level there of dealers who will have cheaper books for people to start with and look and understand. And these dealers that exhibit at this fair are very knowledgeable, they're very passionate about what they do, and they do actually really enjoy meeting new people who are interested in starting to collect. And that's the difference between a rare book fair maybe than just starting looking online, because you actually get to meet the people that know about it and see the books in person. And you learn so much more. And there will be literally tens of thousands of books on exhibition at this fair in one go. I mean, you could take 3 days going through it if you wanted to. So it is a great opportunity to do it. There's lots of smaller rare book fairs, but this is the most premier one, and hence the venue, Saatchi Gallery. It's such a good venue to have our book fair.
Well, there you go. You can see Firsts, London's rare book fair at the Saatchi Gallery from the 15th of September. Some time to book in to see that one. Now, a new aerial art installation has been installed above Oxford Street as part of a clean power campaign, which encourages people to take action on the transition to a low-carbon future. The campaign marks the first time the flags have been curated by an artist and the first time they have supported an environmental cause. Through the digital artwork, the campaign will fund the installation of a new community rooftop solar energy in central London. Hebe has been hearing more.
This is using 105 flags made from recycled ocean plastic, the equivalent of 3,500 recycled plastic bottles, which have been designed by the artist next to me, Morag Myeskov, injecting a sense of positivity and hope in a conversation which is so often doused with negativity when we talk about climate. This is about making people feel that we can be part of the conversation in a positive way and actually being solutions driven.
Morag, tell me about the production of this piece of artwork, about where you sourced the material from and who you worked alongside to kind of create this piece of art.
Because we've worked together, Ollie sourced the material. Yeah. I just came up with the approach to how the work should appear. And it was really important to me that on the streets it was to get strong messaging across about how together we can all make things change. It might take a long while, but we can do it together, and that's really what the messaging is about.
Tell me a little bit about where this idea was born. I mean, we hear the climate emergency is really at our front doorsteps at the moment and everywhere else in the world. But where did you originate this idea from?
We did a pilot project at COP26, and that's where we started looking at ways of tackling the climate crisis. When you look at energy sector as a whole, energy is responsible for almost 3/4 of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So we felt actually if we could try to address this in a really positive way and give people solutions as to how they can be part of the solution rather than the problem, then this was quite an interesting approach to take, and one that hopefully would resonate with the general public and businesses in the area.
So tell me about that message, that positive message, because often it's hard to find a positive outlook in such a pressing and concerning issue.
Well, we felt that I think there's so much negative messaging around climate at the moment that we're at risk of losing people we're at risk of them just putting their heads in the sand and feeling like we've already lost this. So we felt it was very important to change the whole dynamic and allow people to feel like they can actually make change, you know, whether it's for individuals. In this case, you can buy a digital artwork from Morag, designed by Morag, which you can buy for as little as £3, which will be supporting community solar and in central London and planting a new woodland in greater London. And these kind of actions that can make really positive, tangible impact in ways that can also bring a sense of joy and happiness to the people who see the art when they walk across Oxford Street.
And Morag, if there's something that you want people to take away from the piece of art and learn from it, what's that message as well?
Well, I think we are in a real big crisis at the moment and everything is very overwhelming. And I think it's about trying to think that you can, it might, as I said earlier, it might not happen straight away, but in small ways you can get involved and you shouldn't be overwhelmed by everything. And eventually things will grow and, you know, we can make a real substantial change with our energy. And I think that is really key.
There you go. Well, you can see those along Oxford Street now, and you can head to their website to find out more about the Clean Power campaign. Right, let's take a check on the weather now before we leave you this evening. There is a yellow warning of thunderstorms in place, some spells of rain coming in overnight after the temperatures have dropped down into the high 20s today. There is a cooler night ahead than we've had for a few days, with lows of 19 degrees, still warm. Tomorrow we can expect a cloudy start to the day with highs of just 25 degrees. Later in the afternoon there is a chance of some isolated showers. Looking ahead to Wednesday, temperatures in the low 20s with thundery showers over the capital throughout the day. It is clearing into Thursday with some sunshine back on the cards and highs of a more manageable 25 degrees. And that's all from the news team this evening. Thank you for watching. For more updates throughout the day, do head over to our social channels. You can find us in all the usual places at London Live. Well, from me and all the team here, we hope you have a lovely evening and we'll see you back here at 6 o'clock tomorrow.